Hello and welcome to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. This podcast is all about our journey into the woods of ourselves, getting to know who we are, where we are, and where we're going in life so that we can create the life that we want to live. It's about deepening your connection with yourself, taking inspired action, and really trusting yourself and your intuition. It's also about mindset. Our beliefs are such an important part of this journey. And there are so many ways for us to change our mindset so that we can more easily live a life of expansive joy. This podcast is also about going literally into the woods and spending time in nature, and how that can help us on our own personal journey of self-knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us today. Now let's get into this week's episode. Hello, adventurers, and welcome to the Into the Woods podcast, episode 419. This is your host, Holly Worton, and I'm back with another solo episode. Today, I'm going to talk about post-adventure depression or post-adventure blues, or those times when we don't feel great, even though we've just done this really great thing. And the reason I'm talking about this is because I've really been feeling called this year to talk more about mental health and adventure and outdoors and how outdoor adventures help with mental health. So that's something that I've already talked about a bit this year with Yvette Webster in episode 406. We talked about how outdoor adventures can help with mental health. And then the following week, episode 407 with Keith Foskett, we talked about through hiking long distance trails in the US and Spain, but we also touched on depression and mental health. And this is something that's really important to me because I think I've definitely struggled with mental health in the last year or so, more than a year now that we've been dealing with COVID and lockdowns and coming out of lockdown and going back into lockdown and just the weirdness of life now. And my outdoor adventures have really helped me a lot, but I've also been aware of the ups and downs that I've been feeling. And about a month ago, almost now, I ran my first ultra, which I've talked about here on the show. And it was such a great adventure, and I had such a great day, and I really loved it. And since then, I haven't been doing much. I've been really busy, I've been really stressed, and I've only gone running once in the last almost 4 weeks since the event. So that was something that was really notable to me. So the first couple days I was just resting, and then I did go on a run, and then I felt really exhausted afterwards. And then I've just been aware that I've just been tired lately, and I think it's a result of just the stress of this year and the stress, like the mental emotional stress of COVID this year and just life happening, combined with the physical stress of the race. And then I was talking, I think it was last week, with my master gut, and they said, well, it could be post-event depression. And that was something I hadn't thought about. So I know we talk a lot about post-trail depression, like when people do a long-distance trail, especially the longer trails in the United States. They're out on the trail for months at a time, and then they go back to their normal life, except their normal life isn't normal, and they're not the same, and things are different. And so we talk about that a lot, but we don't often talk about post-event depression or post-event blues or post-adventure blues. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I've been doing some research and reflecting on this, and I think this is something that would be useful to talk about because I think a lot of times people don't understand what's happening to them. They had this great experience, life-changing, things are fabulous. Why don't they feel better about it? They should be happy. They did this amazing thing, but that's not always the case. And there have even been cases of people taking their own lives due to post-trail depression. So I think the more we talk about this and the more we become aware of this and the more we become aware that this might happen to us if we have these big adventures, I just think it'll be easier to work through it. And I do not by any means think that we should avoid having big adventures or doing things like this. I just think this is something that we need to be aware of because I think being aware that it might happen means that we can deal with it more quickly and work through it. So, post-adventure depression or post-adventure blues, what is it and why does it happen? So there are a variety of factors. In most cases, you had a very clear goal or purpose, and now it's done. So maybe you were hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a big, long adventure. That was a very clear goal to get from Mexico to Canada. You had a purpose, which was to walk every day to get there, and now you got there and it's done. Or in the case of a race, you've been training for that race, you've been putting in the miles, had a really clear training plan, or like me, you were winging it, and you got to the race day, you did it, and now it's done. And the same goes for other types of adventures. Another thing that I thought might fall into this category is like post-study abroad adventures. So like I remember when 1,000 years ago in the 90s, when I studied abroad in Spain, I was getting to the end of my time in Spain and getting ready to go home, and I was really feeling down. And I really didn't want to go back. And I was really not looking forward to it. And going back was really, really difficult. I just remember really, really struggling and not wanting to be there. And the time I was 21, I guess, and living at home for the summer and kind of butting heads with my parents. And it was just really difficult for me from, now I know, a mental health perspective, but I didn't realize that at the time. It was just, I didn't want to be there and I struggled. So I think study abroad is also a thing, or work abroad, or volunteer abroad, or stuff like that. That's also a big adventure. And stuff like that can also lead to post-study abroad blues. And that's also something to be aware of. Again, you may have been in a community with a common purpose. So if you were on a trail like that, you were surrounded by people who had that common purpose of getting one place to another place. If you were doing like a volunteer abroad or a study abroad program, oftentimes you're part of a community of other students or other volunteers who all have that common purpose to learn a foreign language, to learn a foreign culture, to do the volunteer work. And now that community's disbanded. And, now we have social media, which we didn't have back when I first did my study abroad. So there are easier ways of staying in touch with people, but you're not seeing them every day and you no longer have that common purpose. And that's really difficult when a community that you've been really tight with is no longer together. Also, you've probably grown as a person. You've had this big adventure, whether it's study abroad or training for a race or going on a long-distance trail. And you might be returning to a place or just existing in the same place if it's a race where everyone else might seem the same, but you've grown, you've learned, you have changed as a result of this adventure, and you're different. You're shifting into a new identity. You've got new beliefs about yourself and what your abilities are. You've got more confidence in yourself. And everyone else might seem the same, and that can be different and difficult. Also, there's the fact that being in nature improves mental health. There have been many, many studies confirming this. And if you're doing a long distance trail, you're outdoors all day, every day, and at night. You might be just in a tent at night. And that's giving you a great boost to your mental health. If you're training for an ultra, you're spending a lot of time outdoors on the trails. That's improving your mental health. And maybe now, like me, you're not running outdoors as much. Same for other types of adventures. So it's also important to realize that if you have finished that adventure and gone back into a world where you're not spending as much time outdoors, that can also affect your mental health. Another thing that can affect is lower endorphin levels. So if you're on a long distance trail, you're hiking all day, every day. If you're training for an ultra, you're training a lot. And so you're getting those endorphins, which make you feel great. And after that event or after that adventure, if you're not training as much or doing as much exercise, you might not be experiencing those higher endorphin boosts. So that's another kind of scientific thing that could be causing post-adventure blues. So these are all important things to be aware of. Your body is doing different things. Your mind is getting different chemicals, or it's not getting the chemicals that it liked. And those are really important things to consider, in addition to the fact that, you've lost this community, you've lost this common goal or purpose, and, you're a new you. When does it happen? So, like I said, it can happen post-event or race, post-long-distance trail, and it doesn't have to be one of those super long trails in the United States. I mean, I definitely feel weird coming home after a week in the South Downs. It can also happen, like I said, after other big adventures like study abroad. Happen after a week-long canoe trip down the river, rafting, that kind of thing. any kind of event. It doesn't have to be running or hiking, but happens after these kind of big adventures, which are often outdoor adventures or multicultural adventures or adventures abroad, like travel. If you travel around the world, if you have a gap year, that kind of thing can be really difficult to come back from as well. So I think it's important to plan in advance. So obviously don't not have these adventures because you don't want to have the blues after them, but be aware that it might be coming. Be aware that you might have the blues after your adventure. I think knowing that it might happen is just super, super important. So plan for your life after your adventure. Plan for your life after your thru hike. Plan for your life after your event or your race. Plan for your life after your study abroad. Like, start thinking about what's going to happen when you get back. And of course, you may not know that, especially if it's a really big adventure like an American thru hike. But start thinking about the kinds of things that you might like to do. You don't have to have a clear plan set in stone, but just start reflecting on what you might want to do when you get back. And have future goals, projects, plans, and adventures in mind. So they don't have to be the same kind of thing. So if you've walked or hiked the Pacific Crest Trail, that doesn't mean that you need to go back and do the Appalachian Trail. Or if you did the South Downs Way, that doesn't mean you need to do the Cotswold Way. It doesn't need to be the same kind of thing. And it doesn't need to be the same type of adventure or length of adventure, but start thinking about other things you want to do so that you can start planning other things to look forward to. And again, you don't need to set them in stone, you don't need to get dates down, but just start thinking of things that you would like to experience that are like this adventure. So be aware of that. And during the adventure, be really present in the adventure. Be aware that this is a special time in your life. It's like a special kind of liminal time and space outside of your real life, but also at the time it is your real life. It's really hard to describe. It's like this kind of special window in your life. And it's a special phase or part of your life that will come to an end at one point. And be aware of that and just really appreciate every moment. And at the same time, as I said, start thinking about your next adventure. So start thinking, if you enjoyed this adventure, what might you like to do next? And just start dreaming about other things that you might like to do. So it's kind of that balance of being present in the moment and thinking about how you can get more of this. And then after the adventure is the most important time. Like, really allow yourself to grieve. And this is not just for, a 6-month hike. This can also happen after a 1-week hike. I really, really feel sad when I hike a national trail and it's over, even if it's just a week. I get to the end of the South Downs Way or the Ridgeway and it's like, I don't want it to end. It's just so beautiful. It's just such a great experience. And it makes me sad. And it's really rough to get to the end. And I often find myself the last couple of hours when I know I'm approaching the end of a trail to just kind of take more rest stops and just spend more time slowing down that inevitable end of the trail. So allow yourself to grieve. You don't have to be in tears and like sobbing your heart out to be grieving. Like, it could just be like a sadness. But appreciate the fact that you might feel sad and that you might need to grieve the end of this adventure. And give yourself time to adjust. Getting back into your normal life, it is a transition, even if it's a short trail like a week-long trail. And acknowledge that you're in a transition. So I've often talked in this podcast about the messy middle when you're transitioning from one identity to another, or from one phase of life to another, or one business to a new business. You're in a transition period when you come back from an adventure, and just acknowledge that. Don't expect to just pop back into your life and have things fit like they did before, because you've gone through a big shift. You've gone through an identity shift. You're a new person, probably with new values and interests. You may see things differently. When you're alone on a trail, whether it's for an event or a long-distance hike, you have a lot of time with yourself in your head alone, and you have a lot of time for reflection. So you probably will see things differently. And just be kind to yourself. Engage in self-care. Give yourself permission to take all the time you need to take to get back or to get into this new place. And you might want to stay in touch with your community. So if you were training with other people or hiking with other people, or you met other people on the trail, stay in touch with them. That might help, or it might make it more difficult, especially if some of those people are still out on the trail. I mean, be aware of that in your social media engagement. So does social media help or does it hurt? Does it inspire you to see people who are still on the trail or to see people who are still doing that activity? Or does it hurt? And if it hurts, maybe you need to unfollow some people for a while or just stop paying attention to those types of accounts if you're following a lot of accounts of different trails and things. Just be aware of how you feel when you go on social media, what it is that you need to see. It might help or it might hurt to stay engaged with those things. And again, plan new adventures, plan new goals, plan new projects, because even small adventures are good for a boost. My next big running adventure isn't going to be until next year. I want to do a 100-miler next year. And it's a long time between now and then. So I've got a small adventure. I've got a 50K race in September. I'm going to have to plan some other things between now and 100 miles. And all kinds of other plans and projects and goals. So set new goals for yourself. Come up with new projects. Come up with new adventures. And as always, get professional help if you need it. See a counselor, see a therapist. If you need to go on meds, see your GP for that. That's one thing that Yvette and I talked about in episode 406. She ended up deciding to go back on antidepressants, and that was a decision that she just knew would make her life better. So if that's what you need to do, do it. There's no shame in getting help. On the contrary, professional help may be needed. So remember that. And if you're really, really struggling, get that professional help. Talk to friends, talk to a professional, talk to whomever you have that can help you get the help that you need. And you might want to just spend some time reflecting on your experience, whether it's just thinking about that experience that you had, journaling about it. Think about what that adventure gave you. Did it give you freedom? Did it give you that sense of simplicity, purpose, friends, community? How did the adventure make you feel? What was it that you got from running that race or being on that trail every day? And how can you get some of this in your life now? Again, whether it's through mini adventures or new goals or projects or plans, or just going out for a day and having a really long run or hike or something. How can you get some of what that adventure gave you now in your life? And maybe you feel like you don't have time to spend a whole day doing something. So maybe you could, go for a little run or go for a little hike or just spend some time outdoors. Because remember, being out in nature can help mental health in big ways. And do something that will get those endorphins boosting. Whether that's, a brisk walk or a run or something else. But above all, just be kind to yourself and be aware that this happens and that there's nothing wrong with you if it happens. And don't feel like, I don't deserve to feel this way because I had this great experience and I should be happy. There are no shoulds here. Like, you feel how you feel and give yourself permission to feel those feels. And again, get the help that you need if you need help. So this is going to be a short one today. I just wanted to get this out there because I know this happens a lot, and I don't think we talk about mental health as much as we could or should. I think that is a should. So be aware that if you do one of these big adventures, you might get the blues afterwards. Know that it might be coming. Be aware of it. If it does happen, I don't know, maybe listen to this episode again and get some ideas for how you can feel better. For me, I'd wanted to plan some camping trips because camping is just really what makes me feel better. A lot of the campsites that I like to stay at are fully booked for August, so that probably won't be happening until September. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is get back into running and get back into training for my adventure in September, but also feed my soul through workations. I'd paused my workation weekends for a while, and I just really feel like I haven't been filling that creative well, and I need to do that. So I might be planning a couple of workations for the month of August because I need to catch up on getting that part of my soul fed. And I often go to places on workations that people won't be going to now that it's the summer holidays. So I think that will be an easier thing for me to book. So that's how I'm dealing with it. And probably going to do some smaller things, like smaller adventures. I don't know. I need to figure it out. But August will be a month for catching up on my creative stuff, which will make me feel better, and getting back into running, which will also make me feel better, and focusing on healing my shoulder. I don't know if I've mentioned it here, but I've had this shoulder injury, which means that I haven't been able to do kickboxing, and it's been going on for a really long time, and I've finally started focusing more on healing that thing. So I'm doing more therapy and stuff for that. And that will also make me feel better because it makes me sad to not be able to do kickboxing, which is a thing that I love. So I've got a plan. I'm going to be working on the plan in the month of August and beyond. And yeah, I hope that gives you some ideas for how you can get through your post-adventure blues if you have it. And maybe reflect on past experiences. Have you ever experienced post-adventure blues? What helped you get through it? And maybe make a menu. I'm big on menus. Stuff that could help. So if, as you were listening to this, you were thinking, oh, this is the kind of thing that might help. It might help to go to a park. It might help to go camping. It might help to go for a run or a walk or a hike or whatever, or just go for a walk with a friend or whatever. Make your menu of things that will help you feel better. And have that on hand before your next adventure so that you can pull out that menu when you need it. Again, that menu is going to be different for different people, but hopefully this episode will have given you some ideas of things that might make you feel better. And again, get professional help if you need it. There's no shame in getting help. On the contrary, that's what they're there for. That's what they've studied many, many years for, is to help people when they need it. So get help. That is all for now. I've got a really great Cara Wild's going to be coming up on the show in a couple of weeks. We're going to be talking about adventures with stone circles. As you know, Avebury is something that's really, really important to me. It's a very important place, but Cara lives in Cornwall, which is full of stone circles, lesser known stone circles, and she does a lot of work with them, and she spends a lot of time with them, and so we're going to talk about that. So that's really exciting in a couple of weeks. And I know I had said this week we'd be talking about forest bathing and nature connection. That will be hopefully coming up soon. And I've got other guests that are in the pipeline, so they will be a surprise because I don't know exactly when we're going to do them. But I have some good things coming. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And drop me a line and let me know what you thought of this week's episode. Email me at holly@hollyworton.com or find me online and get in touch. And as always, remember to visit hollyworton.com/419 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you very much. Have a great week and happy trails to you. Thanks so much for listening to Into the Woods with Holly Worton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed, at hollyworton.com. That's HOLLYWORTON.com. If you'd like to connect with other listeners and get support on your journey, I would love for you to join my private community on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. That's patreon.com/Holly Worton. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next week.